Highland Park, Illinois, was the kind of place where the 4th of July felt safe, familiar, and warm. Every year, the town held its Independence Day parade down Central Avenue, and for decades, nothing bad had ever happened. People had shown up early to claim a good spot, some bringing coolers and picnic blankets, others milling around the local shops that opened early for the crowd. There was no warning, no strange behavior, just a buzz of excitement and the rising sound of the parade moving closer. Then, just as the first few floats turned the corner, people had brought their families, celebrated together, laughed, clapped, and eaten funnel cakes, thinking they were safe. Highland Park will never forget that morning, because it reminded them and all of us that sometimes the most terrifying moments happen in the places we once thought were safe, thinking this was a place where things like that didn't happen. But horror doesn't need a reason, and it doesn't always give a warning. In one instant, a peaceful parade turned into a crime scene, and the red, white, and blue decorations fluttering in the wind took on an entirely different meaning. A loud popping sound echoed through the air. At first, many mistook it for fireworks. After all, it was the 4th of July. But when people began dropping to the ground, screaming and scrambling behind planters and benches, it became horrifyingly clear that what they were hearing was gunfire. Families lined the sidewalks with lawn chairs and strollers. Kids waved miniature flags, and floats passed by with smiling veterans and local school bands. It was exactly the kind of suburban celebration that made people feel removed from the ugliness of the world until July 4th, 2022, when that illusion shattered in less than a minute. That morning had started like all the others. A man, later identified as 21-year-old Robert Cremo III, had climbed onto the roof of a nearby building and opened fire on the crowd below using a high-powered rifle. The shots were rapid and relentless. Within seconds, chaos took over. Parents shielded their children, people fled in every direction, and parade participants abandoned their floats in panic. 7 people were killed, dozens more were wounded, and even more suffered injuries in the frantic rush to escape. The images from that day blood-stained flags, overturned strollers, and lost shoes scattered across the pavement would be seared into the town's memory forever. Emergency services arrived quickly, but the damage had already been done. Witnesses later described a surreal silence that followed the attack, broken only by sobs and distant sirens. Police launched a manhunt, and after a tense few hours, Cremo was apprehended without incident. He had disguised himself in women's clothing to blend in with the fleeing crowd after the shooting, and he'd driven off in his mother's car. The attack had been premeditated. Investigators later discovered disturbing online content he had posted, and his access to weapons raised immediate concerns about how easily such violence could be planned and executed. What made the shooting even more terrifying was how normal that morning had felt just moments before. Today, the town is forever changed. Memorials line the streets every July, and the sound of fireworks, once joyful, now leaves many residents frozen with anxiety. Lake Martin, Alabama, is usually a peaceful place to spend the 4th of July. Boaters lining the water, families grilling by the docks, and the sky lighting up with fireworks reflected in the lake's surface. A handful of friends, all in their 30s and 40s, had set up an impromptu fireworks launch on an old pontoon boat tied just offshore from one of the rental cabins. They de-bought illegal mortar out of state bigger than what sold locally, and rigged them into launch tubes they set in the center of the boat. The idea was to give their families a show of their own before the city's fireworks display kicked off later that night. Investigators found melted tubes, scorched equipment, and splattered chemical residue coating parts of the dock. What was meant to be a bold backwoods celebration nearly turned fatal in an instant. And every 4th of July, no one sets off fireworks there anymore. Not after the night the boat became a fireball. The survivors later said they felt lucky just to be alive, though some of them now bear lifelong scars. Several people gathered on shore to watch, with drinks in hand and phones out to record what was supposed to be a memorable homemade display. At the moment the fireball erupted, her phone glitched just a fraction of a second where the frame froze, then reversed, showing the flames pulling inward instead of bursting out. It only happened once and couldn't be replicated. Some say it was just a camera malfunction. Others whispered about something darker, a warning, maybe, that they'd crossed a line by turning the lake into a launch pad. For most people that year, the evening was just that music, laughter, and the usual small-town celebration. But for one group of men who tried to make their own fireworks show on the water, the night turned from festive to horrifying in a matter of seconds. It started with a plan that felt innocent enough, but things went wrong almost immediately. One of the first mortar launched crooked, its shell veering sideways before exploding in the air far too low. The fireball lit up the lake like daylight, and when it faded, 6 men were either in the water or crawling on what was left of the smoldering platform. Several of them were badly burned, one with injuries so severe he had to be airlifted to Birmingham for emergency care. The dock where they'd launched from caught fire too, and some of the spectators dove into the lake to avoid being hit by shrapnel or heat. Some people clapped, thinking it was part of the fun. Then the second firework didn't leave the tube, just exploded where it was. And within 2 seconds, every firework on the boat ignited in a chain reaction. The entire pontoon was consumed in a burst of light, sparks, and flame. People on shore screamed and scrambled as debris flew into the water, and fiery sparks shot in every direction. Witnesses later said it looked like the boat simply vanished in the blast. The official reports confirmed that the fireworks weren't legal in Alabama and weren't designed to be launched from such a short distance. The strangest part? One of the women watching from shore had caught the whole thing on video. To this day, people on that stretch of Lake Martin swear they can still see faint burn marks on the wood of the dock, even though it was completely rebuilt. Ask ChatGPT. It was a warm and breezy 4th of July evening on a Massachusetts beach, one of those classic coastal gatherings where families brought folding chairs, kids built sandcastles, and the smell of grilled food mixed with salt water in the air, and launched tubes claiming they were leftovers from a few years back. Most people didn't think much of it. He had a cigarette tucked behind one ear and a lighter in hand as he crouched over one of the tubes, muttering to himself. His grandchildren, sitting under a beach umbrella a few yards back, were watching him with bored curiosity. A few beachgoers took out their phones, not because they expected anything to go wrong. The fireworks crate was obliterated, its contents scattered and burning. Joe was unresponsive, his injuries catastrophic. Moisture, age, and poor handling had made them incredibly volatile. It wasn't just one faulty firework, it was essentially a homemade bomb. His family was devastated, left to process the trauma of watching someone they loved turn a holiday tradition into his own accidental funeral. Bystanders who had caught it on camera immediately handed their footage to police. Shaky, awful clips that showed a man dying in the glow of his own fireworks, the celebration turning into horror in the blink of an eye. A red flare from a first responder's kit hovered over the area while the crowd dispersed in somber quiet. And in the weeks that followed, the video of the explosion circulated on the darker corners of social media. Though most platforms took it down quickly, copies still existed. Some users slowed it down, claiming they could see something strange, something unnatural in the moment the fire ignited. A flash of something behind Joe, barely visible in the shadows. A shape that didn't belong, but most dismissed it as smoke and panic, a trick of light. Nothing more. But because a 70-year-old man lighting his own fireworks show was the kind of quirky thing you recorded to post online later. Fireworks are no longer allowed on that stretch of beach, not even sparklers. Locals remember the night not with patriotism or celebration, but with a chill, because they watched a man light his own death and there was nothing they could do to stop it. He'd done this before, set up a small DIY show near the dunes, while everyone else watched from a safe distance. Some even looked forward to his tradition, assuming he knew what he was doing. But what no one realized was that the fireworks he had brought weren't just old, they were unstable. The sky had turned that soft navy blue just before the fireworks show, and people lined the shore to watch local displays while a few brave and maybe reckless individuals brought their own fireworks to add to the celebration. Among them was an older man, someone the locals referred to simply as Joe, 70 years old, wiry, still spry for his age, and known to be a bit stubborn when it came to doing things himself. In a split second, the entire launch platform lit up in a violent flash. Not a firework ascending into the sky, but an explosion at ground level. Sand, debris, and fire erupted outward in a brutal radius. Joe was thrown backward with terrifying force, landing in a heap several feet away. For a moment, no one moved. Then screams began. Children cried. People dropped their phones. Some ran forward while others froze in shock. Joe had apparently brought a small crate of mortar shells. Witnesses said he had everything rigged on a small plywood board anchored into the sand. But then something went wrong, terribly wrong. As he leaned over to light the first mortar, a loud pop erupted, much louder and sharper than anyone expected. Emergency responders who were already on site for the beach event rushed toward the smoke. The investigation revealed that the fireworks Joe had used were illegal for private use in Massachusetts and had been stored improperly for years. What made it worse was the silence afterward. The music stopped. The official fireworks show was canceled. Now, each year, the town holds a small candlelight vigil in the spot where it happened.